She was left to die hanging from a barbed wire fence with a crude wooden sign around her neck that read, "She shamed the whole town." He'd only gone out to mend a broken gate. But he found her instead, and everything changed. The snow had crusted over just enough to make the ground crack beneath his boots. Eli Cutter moved slow, breath clouding from his mouth as he worked his way along the fence line, hammer in one hand, slats under the other. The winter had been long, and the stillness out here was the only thing that made sense anymore. His ranch had gone quiet since Martha passed. Too quiet, even for a man like him who never had much use for words. He didn't notice the shape at first. It wasn't moving. Just another bundle of shadow sagged along the fence. A forgotten pelt maybe left behind by some trapper. But then the wind shifted and the shape swayed. He dropped the hammer. The girl was tied at the wrists. Wire looped cruelly through to keep her upright, her hair matted against the post behind her. Her coat was missing, just a thin blouse clinging to her frame, soaked through and stiff. Her head lolled forward, strands of long black hair hiding her face. The sign dangled from her neck, swinging against her chest with the insult burned in black letters. Barely 20, if that. And with one glance, Eli saw the curve of her stomach beneath the soaked cotton. Pregnant. For a second, he didn't move, just stared. This land had seen its share of cruelty, but this was something else. Deliberate. Public. Someone wanted her shamed, not just silenced. But she was breathing. Barely. Shallow and slow, but still there. He moved fast then. His knife made quick work of the wire, though it tore into her skin even as he pulled it away. She collapsed forward, and he caught her before she hit the ground. She didn't cry out, didn't even twitch. Just breathed, one thin breath at a time. "You're all right now," he muttered, even though he wasn't sure if she could hear. "You're coming with me." Her skin was ice. She weighed almost nothing. Eli didn't have a wagon. He hadn't expected company of any sort, let alone this. So he bundled her in his coat, wrapped her arms around his neck, and carried her. A mile and a half back to the house. No words, just her breath against his collarbone and the steady crunch of snow beneath him. She never stirred. Once inside, he laid her near the fire, moved fast to light the stove and pull every blanket he owned from the chest at the foot of his bed. Her lips were blue, her cheeks hollow, her feet, bare and cracked, looked more like a traveler's than a girl's. He fetched water, dabbed the blood from her wrists, then pressed a mug to her mouth. Nothing, just silence, until she gasped. It was a tiny thing, a twitch, a breath caught too deep, but her eyes fluttered open only briefly. Brown, large, terrified. Then they closed again. Her hands moved to her stomach instinctively. Protective. "Easy," he whispered. "You're safe now." She didn't respond, but she didn't fight him either. Eli sat back and watched her all through the night. The fire popped. The clock ticked. And in that dim room, it was just the two of them. A man too broken to hope, and a girl the world had tried to throw away. By morning, color had returned to her cheeks. She woke with a gasp and bolted upright, eyes wild. Eli moved slow, kept his voice low. "You're my house," he said. "Found you at my fence yesterday. You were near frozen." Her gaze darted everywhere. Her arms went immediately to her belly. "It's still there," he added. "Child's fine, I think." She looked at him then, really looked, and for a second, he saw a flicker of something between fear and disbelief. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. "I'm Eli," he said. "Cutter." Still nothing. He pointed toward the mug beside her. "That's water. Clean." She reached for it with shaking hands. Drank slow. Then her voice came, hoarse and barely audible. "Neil." "What's that?" "My name." He nodded. "All right, then." The silence stretched. She stared at the fire like it might bite her. Eli watched from the chair near the window. She didn't ask to leave. Didn't ask anything. Just held her belly and waited. After a while, she whispered, "They thought I was a curse." Eli didn't speak. He knew better than to push. Words would come when they were ready. Niall didn't sleep that night. She sat up by the hearth, eyes open and hollow. Eli gave her space. The next day, she moved slow, but she moved. Ate a little. washed her face, said nothing else. Days passed, then a week. She never asked for more than food and warmth, never touched anything that wasn't hers. She stared out the windows sometimes, but never went near the door. And every night, she folded herself near the fire like a creature expecting to be dragged out again come dawn. It took nearly a fortnight before Eli saw her smile. Barely a curve, just a moment of softness when the fire crackled too loud and startled his old hound dog, Jasper. The mud had barked once, then hid under the table. Niall laughed, quiet but real. After that, things shifted. She began speaking in fragments. "I was meant to be someone's wife," she said one afternoon, stirring the stew. Eli didn't look up. "You still can be. He died before it happened." He nodded. "I'm sorry." She said nothing more. The next time she spoke of it, she said, "They said I was cursed. That's why he died. Do you believe that?" She hesitated. "I did, until you found me." The snow melted. Bit by bit, spring threatened to bloom. Eli fixed the front step. Niall swept the hearth. She still moved like a ghost, but her eyes held more light now. One morning, she asked, "Why'd you help me?" Eli paused mid-nail, looked over his shoulder. "Would have helped anyone hung like that. But I'm not anyone." He didn't flinch. "You were breathing. That was enough." She nodded slowly. "Thank you. Don't need thanks. You could have turned me in. I don't turn in survivors." She smiled again. Then came the first letter, tucked in the doorframe, no name, just a folded scrap. "You should know what kind of girl you've got in there." Eli burned it in the stove without opening it further. The second came 2 days later. "She's why the preacher's son drowned. They said her baby's cursed." This one he tore up, tossed it into the fire. By the third, Niall found it before he did. She didn't cry, just held it tight in her hand and asked softly, "Would you rather I go?" "No," Eli said, and that was the end of that. But the warnings didn't stop. A rock shattered the front window. One night, the barn was set alight, but the snow kept it from catching fully. Eli stood guard by the door, rifle in hand. Niall never once asked him to, but she watched him as he stood there. For hours, until her fingers reached toward his sleeve. Just the briefest brush. "You should have let me freeze," she whispered. Eli didn't answer, just kept watching the tree line. But in his heart, something old and hardened began to split. He hadn't touched another soul since Martha. Hadn't let anyone touch him either. But that brush of her fingers, it wasn't just fear. It was hope, trembling and shy. She didn't want to be saved. She wanted to belong. And for the first time in too long, so did he. The town wouldn't stop. But Eli had made up his mind. He wouldn't let her go. Not now. Not ever. The road into town was washed out in places, muddy and cruel under the wheels of Eli's wagon. He rarely made the trip anymore, preferring to send for what he needed or do without. But this time, he drove. Not for supplies. Not for errands. For answers. Niall didn't ask where he was going. She simply stood on the porch as he hitched up the old team, hands folded over the swell of her stomach, eyes calm but wary. She didn't say goodbye, just watched him go. Eli's coat still held the faint scent of wood smoke and juniper when he stepped into the general store. Ezra Boone, the owner, flinched at the sight of him. Folks knew not to cross Eli Cutter, not because he was dangerous, but because he didn't care for noise. He was a man of silence and sharp edges, and when he showed up somewhere, it was never for gossip. Boone cleared his throat, wiping invisible dust from the counter. "Mornin', Cutter. Who left the note?" Eli asked, voice flat. "Nobody ambid." Boone blinked. "What note?" "The one stuck on my doorframe. The one warning me about the girl." Boone glanced around, as if hoping someone else might speak in his place. The store was empty save for a farmhand pawing through tins. "I don't know nothing about that," Boone said, too quickly. Eli leaned forward slightly. Not threatening, not loud, just closer. "You know what happens when folks poke at a wound and don't let it heal?" he asked. Boone swallowed. "They rot," Eli said, "and they take others down with them." With that, he turned and walked out. He bought nothing, needed nothing. Not from that place. Back home, Niall had started boiling water. She sat near the stove, a basket of baby clothes, mostly hand-stitched, beside her. The old cabin had never looked like this before. Lived in, warm, breathing again, and not because of him. I think it's close, she said softly, not looking up. Her hand rested on her stomach. The baby, Illy nodded, will be ready. I've had dreams, she continued, of water, of wolves, but sometimes of a face. What kind of face? Yours. He paused. You were always there, she said, her voice almost breaking. Long before you found me. Eli didn't know how to answer that, so he didn't. He stepped over to the fire and stirred the stew instead. Words were strange things, dangerous, slippery, but actions? Those were solid, rooted. He kept her safe. That was enough. But safety, like snow in April, doesn't last. It was midnight when the first stone hit the wall. Not the window this time. Just a loud thunk against the siding. Then another. Eli was out the door before the third landed. 3 shadows near the tree line. Torches. He raised his rifle. You want to talk? He called out, voice loud in the still night. Come closer. No one moved. Then one of them shouted, She don't belong here. She ain't yours to keep. Another rock hit the porch rail. Eli didn't fire. Not yet, but he raised the rifle higher. If you come any closer, he said, you best be ready to meet the Lord. The shadows faded into the trees. Inside, Niall hadn't moved from her spot, but her eyes shone wide and glassy in the firelight. They won't stop, she whispered. Let him try, he replied. But they both knew the truth. The town didn't forget what it hated, and it hated what it didn't understand. Eli sat by the door with the rifle across his knees until morning. Jasper curled at his feet. Niall stayed in the corner, arms around herself. Neither of them slept. By the end of the week, a new sign appeared at the edge of his property. This one nailed to a tree. It read simply, Devil's Girl lives here. Eli burned that too. The birthing came sudden, violent. A storm rolled in from the south, heavy with rain and thunder, and Niall doubled over while stirring a pot of beans. Her cries split the silence, and Eli rushed in from the barn. It's happening, she gasped. He lifted her, carried her to the bed. She gripped his wrist hard enough to bruise. I don't know what to do, she admitted, voice panicked. You'll do fine, he said, brushing the hair from her face. I don't know how, neither did Martha, he said. But she did it. You will too. Hours passed. The wind screamed against the shutters. Lightning cut across the hills, and thunder boomed loud enough to shake dust from the rafters. Niall screamed too, and then there was a cry, not hers. Tiny. Vet. Alive. A girl. Eli had delivered calves. Lambs. Even a neighbor's boy once when the doctor never came. But nothing compared to this, to the way Niall looked at the child, to the way the child quieted when placed against her chest. They wept together, mother and daughter. Eli stood back, hands shaking. She's beautiful, he whispered. Niall looked up at him, tears streaking her cheeks. She's ours now, she said. He didn't correct her, didn't tell her what he'd always known. He'd never have children of his own. The doctor had told him that years ago, before Martha died. It had nearly broken him. But now, there was a baby sleeping in his home, and a woman who had called him ours. That night, they named her Sky. The next morning, someone had left something at the gate again. Not a rock, not a sign, a dead rabbit, skinned, laid across a baby's blanket. Niall cried silently. Eli buried it deep, farther than the fields. When he returned, she was standing by the cradle, fingers trailing over Sky's forehead. I can't stay, she whispered. You will stay, he said firm. They'll come again. Let them. They might burn it down with her inside. Eli stipped closer. If you go, they win. If you stay, we fight. I don't want to fight. Then I'll fight for you. She looked up at him, and in that moment she believed him. Completely. But fear has a long memory. Days later, a man came riding in from the ridge. He wore a sheriff's badge, though his face was unfamiliar. I came to ask some questions, he said. Eli didn't invite him in, just leaned on the porch rail. About a girl. Navajo. Went missing months back. Word is she ran off. But now folks are saying she's here. She's not missing, Eli said. Is she here? She's safe. That ain't what I asked. You'll get the same answer. The sheriff's hand twitched near his belt, then stilled. You sheltering her? I'm sheltering a woman with a newborn who's done nothing but try to stay alive. The man narrowed his eyes. Justice don't sleep, Cutter. Neither do I, Eli said. You want to take her, you'll have to kill me first. A long silence. Finally, the sheriff muttered, ain't worth the trouble, and rode off. But it wasn't over. Eli knew that. That night, he sat by the cradle. Niall curled up on the floor nearby, too tired to speak. Skye gurgled softly in her sleep. And Eli, with the rifle across his knees, whispered to the fire, you're mine now. Both of you. I won't let anyone take you. Outside, wind howled, but the fire stayed steady. Eli nailed a second latch to the door by mid-morning, reinforced the back windows with cutboards. Not because he expected someone to come that day, but because when they did, he meant to be ready. He wasn't a fool. Cowards didn't attack in daylight. They waited for weakness, for dark, for silence. Inside, Niall moved slower now, her body healing in fragments. The baby stirred constantly, fussing more than sleeping. Skye had a voice that filled the house, sharp and insistent, but Niall never shushed her. She just held her close and hummed low, something in a language Eli didn't understand. The sounds curled through the rooms like smoke, foreign but warm. Eli found himself listening for it when he worked the fields. He'd pause with his hands around a fence post and just wait. To hear that soft hum threading through the wind. Something about it kept him steady, like he wasn't alone in the world anymore. Jasper, the old dog, stayed closer to the porch than usual. Watched the tree line. Watched Eli. He was sensing things too. 3 days after the sheriff rode off, someone set fire to the woodpile. Eli was in the barn when the crackling started. It wasn't loud, not at first, just a hiss. But by the time he reached the edge of the field, the flames were eating through his winter supply like a wild thing. He grabbed the pail and doused what he could, kicked snow over the rest. It was too far gone. He didn't even curse, just stood staring at the blackened remains. Inside the cabin, Niall watched him from the window. She didn't come out, but that night, she folded a bundle of baby clothes tighter and set it quietly beside the door. You think it's time? Eli asked, his voice a quiet rasp. I think the land is trying to spit me out, she said. Maybe I don't belong here. You belong here more than the people who set fires. She didn't answer. And then, from the cradle, Skye began to cry. Loud, sharp, a sound that didn't care about town gossip or burned kindling. Just hunger, need, life. Eli turned toward the noise, and Niall saw it in his face. Something soft, protective, immovable. She didn't say another word about leaving. Not that night. The next morning, Eli rode into town alone. He needed more wood, more nails, more ammunition. He didn't tie his horse outside the general store this time. Rode it right up to the rail and left it there, blocking the boardwalk like a boulder. Inside, Boone barely looked at him. I'll take 24 rounds, Eli said, placing silver coins on the counter. And whatever you've got in good pine. Boone nodded, turned to gather the supplies. From the back corner, a voice Eli didn't recognize drawled, heard you're hiding some wild girl up in them hills. Eli didn't look at him. Is that so? Girl that don't know her place. Heard she's got herself a mongrel already. Boone froze mid-shelf. Eli turned, slow as snowfall, and faced the man. He wore a brown hat too big for his head, boots too clean for ranch work. His smile didn't reach his eyes. You a preacher? Eli asked. The man laughed. Hardly. Then don't speak like you know God's mind. The smile slipped. Eli stipid closer. You, or your friends, ever ride past my fence again, you won't come back with your hats on. You understand me? The store went dead silent. Then Boone cleared his throat and slid the box of bullets across the counter. Careful, Cutter, the other man muttered. World don't take kindly to mixing bloodlines. Eli didn't answer. Didn't need to. The weight of his silence said more than 100 threats. He rode home with supplies stacked high in the cart. That night, he found Niall outside, standing barefoot in the snow. She wasn't shivering, just looking up at the stars. He stepped beside her without a word. You know what they call the stars in my tongue? She asked. He shook his head. Eyes of the ancestors. Watching. Guiding. You think they see us now? He asked. I think they saw you before I did. He turned to look at her, really look at her. Face lit silver by moonlight, baby cradled against her chest. And he wondered if maybe she was right. It stood like that a long time. Days passed. No new visitors. No signs. No fires. But the quiet didn't settle easy. It felt stretched thin, like a string ready to snap. Eli kept watch. He barely slept. Jasper paced the porch at night. Then, one morning, Sky wouldn't stop crying. Her face red, hands clenched. Niall rocked her, hummed to her, even tried a bit of warmed milk soaked in a cloth. Nothing worked. Eli offered to fetch the doctor. It's too far, Niall said. I'll ride through the night, if I have to. She'll be fine. But Eli wasn't so sure. Something in the child's cries clawed at him, like a warning. He rode anyway, reached the town doctor's cottage after dark, banged on the door until a lantern glowed behind the window. Doc Avery opened up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Lord, Cutter, you look like death. Baby's sick. I thought you didn't have, she's mine now. The doctor didn't ask more, just packed a bag and rode with him. They reached the cabin by dawn. Sky was burning with fever. Niall had dark circles under her eyes and wouldn't let go of the baby until Avery insisted. Eli paced while the doctor worked. Every cry that came from that tiny mouth felt like a knife to the gut. She'll live, Avery said finally. It's just a fever. Strong lungs. Niall nearly collapsed with relief. But Eli didn't rest. Couldn't. The doctor took a long look at both of them before he left. I won't tell anyone I came here, he said. But the wrong kind of attention's building, Cutter. Town's stirring. Let him stir, Eli said. I hope you know what you're doing. Eli didn't answer. After the fever broke, Niall slept for nearly 2 days straight. Eli sat by the cradle the whole time, watching Sky breathe. She had her mother's nose. Her skin darkened a little more each day, bronzing like the desert. He didn't realize how much he loved her until he imagined the house without her cries. Then came the letter, folded under a rock on the porch. No name, just 3 lines. You were warned. She doesn't belong. We'll take her back one way or another. Niall found it before Eli did. She didn't speak for an hour after. That night, she asked a question she hadn't before. If something happens to me, will you raise her? Eli's throat locked up. Yes, he said. Then she looked him in the eye. If something happens to you, I'll raise her too. And that was it. No talk of leaving. No talk of surrender. Just a vow. 2 days later, the fence broke. A clean split, like someone had taken an axe to it in the night. No livestock wandered, but the message was clear. Eli rebuilt it by moonlight. Each post hammered deeper than the last. By the time he finished, he wasn't thinking about defense anymore. He was thinking about what it meant to build a home. Not just a house, not just a shelter, but a home where a girl who wasn't his by blood could grow without fear. Where a woman could sing to the stars without someone lighting fires to drown her out. And if it meant standing in front of every bullet to come, so be it. Because Eli Cutter, widower and wanderer, had found the 2 people he was willing to live and die for. He just didn't know yet how much he'd be asked to give. The air turned colder the next morning, not with the bite of weather, but the kind that pressed low and heavy across the shoulders. The kind men felt in their gut long before they saw trouble. Eli Cutter rose early, stood on his porch with coffee in one hand and the rifle in the other. Across the woods, birds sang too loud. The wind refused to settle. Something was wrong. Inside, Niall wrapped Sky in the blanket her mother had stitched years ago, the one she'd brought hidden in her skirt when they banished her from the village. She was quiet that morning, her face pale but calm. She didn't need to ask Eli what he was thinking. She already knew. She felt it too. You should go, he said. No, they'll come for her first. Or you. I don't know how many or when, but they will. And what? Run again. Hide in another man's woods until they find me there too? I've done enough running. Eli didn't press. He didn't have a right. But the fear in his chest settled like stone. That afternoon, they cleared the root cellar. Not because they were hiding, but because it was the only safe place if shooting started. They lined the walls with water jugs, jars of preserved berries, and wrapped Sky's cradle in layers of wool. That evening, just before sundown, Eli saw the first rider. He was far off, just a silhouette near the ridgeline, unmoving. Watching, Eli lit the lantern anyway, as if nothing had changed. He pulled Niall to the back room and kissed Sky's forehead while she slept. "Wake her gently if you have to," he told Niall. "And you, I'll be out front." He didn't sleep that night, just sat by the hearth with the shotgun across his lap and Jasper by his feet. He sharpened the knife slowly, deliberately, not because he needed to, but because it gave his hand something to do. The old dog didn't move once. He just stared at the door like he meant to die beside it. Nothing came, but the next morning, 2 more riders appeared. They didn't come to the house. They just stood at the edge of the clearing, just past the tree line, watching, always watching. By midday, they were gone. What are they waiting for? Niall whispered that night. For us to lose patience. Or sleep, Eli said. They're counting on fear to do the work for them. Then we don't give it to them. It was the first time she'd spoken with fire since the night he found her hanging from the fence. Eli nodded, proud and afraid in equal measure. They moved like that for 3 more days, quietly, deliberately. They lived in the hollow of each breath, each step, like deer knowing they were being hunted. Jasper stopped sleeping indoors, choosing instead to sit outside the porch all night. His fur stood on end every time the wind shifted. He growled at shadows. On the 4th day, Niall caught Eli carving something near the shed. A small piece of cedar, not bigger than a fist. He didn't say what it was, just kept shaving it with his knife, over and over. That evening, she found on her pillow a carving of a woman holding a child, smooth in the lines but rough in the hands, like it had been made by someone still learning what softness felt like. She touched it like it might break. Then came the storm, not of men, but of wind and lightning. A real one. The sky split open just before midnight, thunder rolling down the hills like the voice of the Lord himself. The wind ripped branches from trees. Rain poured in sheets so thick they couldn't see the barn. Eli and Niall worked side by side to reinforce the windows, to haul what supplies they could back indoors. Sky cried the whole time, her small body sensing the tension that gripped the house like a vice. They barely spoke. They didn't need to. When it passed, half the field was gone. The fence was down again. This time it wasn't sabotage, just weather. But it felt like one more crack in a dam that couldn't hold much longer. That morning, Eli didn't eat. He just stared at the map he'd nailed to the wall years ago. Routes out. Mountains. Trails. "I'm not taking her from here," Niall said, reading his mind. "I can't bury another." She said nothing. The next night, Eli heard it. Footsteps. Not loud. Not urgent. Just deliberate. He stepped outside with the rifle tucked close to his ribs. The wind had died down. The moon glowed high and swollen. Jasper stayed at the doorway, tense. The figure emerged from the trees with no urgency. A man, hat low, coat long and stiff. He didn't carry a torch, didn't ride a horse. Eli raised the rifle. "Stop where you are." The man did. "I'm not here to fight," he called. "That's good, because I don't fight. I end." "You got her in there?" "The girl?" "I got a family in there." "Speak careful." The man held up both hands. "I came alone. Sheriff's orders. I'm not here for blood." "You set that fire?" "No, that was done without his blessing." Eli stepped down from the porch, but didn't lower the gun. The man nodded toward the cabin. "Town's got a meeting planned. Not just about her. About you. They think you've lost your mind. Say you're harboring trouble. I'm harboring a mother and a child. They think it's more than that. They're right." The man paused. "She's not safe here," he said after a while. "You know that. I know that. Sheriff's only got so much pull." Eli's jaw flexed. "What's your name?" he asked. "Caleb. I used to live down the west end of town. Used to, until I married a girl from the Cheyenne side. Folks didn't like that." Eli finally lowered the rifle. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't care who she is. I care what kind of mother she is. What kind of man you are." He looked toward the house. "They'll vote soon. If it swings the wrong way, the sheriff won't be able to stop it." Eli nodded. "I understand." Before Caleb turned to leave, he said one more thing. "There's a hollow up in the northern ridge. Mine entrance sealed off. No one goes there since the collapse. If things turn, run there." Then he disappeared into the trees again. Eli didn't sleep that night. The next day, he built 2 more crates, packed essentials, blankets, powder, food. He showed Niall how to saddle the mule, how to hold a rifle, where the maps were. When she asked if he was scared, he said, yes. Then she kissed him, just once, and nothing else needed saying. That evening, the letter came again. Same handwriting. They voted. 4 against, 3 for. You got 2 days. Eli folded the paper slowly and tossed it into the hearth. Niall didn't cry. Neither did he, because they weren't victims anymore. They were family. And whatever storm came next, he'd rather face it beside her than spend another day in safety alone. The next sunrise looked like any other, but Eli knew better. He didn't wait for confirmation. He didn't need another note, another shadow lingering at the edge of the woods. The decision had already been made, not by the town, not even by the vote, but by the silence that followed. It was too quiet now, too deliberate, like the world was holding its breath for the first scream to split it open. He fed the fire early, packed supplies without making a sound. Niall watched him from the corner of the room, Sky in her arms. The baby cooed, unaware of the urgency coiling in her mother's chest. Eli moved with practiced calm, but his eyes flicked to the windows every few minutes, and that told Niall more than any words could. They were running today. We leave at dusk, he said. Niall didn't argue. She'd already prepared, silently folding blankets, filling canteens, and wrapping small bundles of dried food days earlier. She'd waited until he said it aloud, but her heart had known it all along. They couldn't stay. Not anymore. Eli had drawn the route in his mind the night before. North Ridge. Abandoned mine. Caleb said no one went there. Not since the collapse took 3 men back in the fall of '78. But Eli remembered the place. He'd passed it once years ago while hunting elk. He recalled how still it was, how the sound of birds even refused to cross the entrance. That made it perfect. They worked separately, quietly, speaking only when needed. Jasper sensed the tension and wouldn't leave the porch. The dog paced, growled, then lay down again only to rise once more. He was waiting too, though for what, Eli couldn't say. At midday, Niall swaddled Sky and tied her to her back in a shawl her grandmother had woven years before. The fabric was old, faded in places but strong. She whispered a prayer into the folds before tying it off, one last breath of strength in ancient syllables. Eli brought the mule around. The crate strapped to its side was packed full, blankets, dried meat, cartridges, and a second rifle he hadn't fired in years. The path to the mine wouldn't be easy. They'd be slow, and they'd likely be watched, but there was no choice left. They left just after the sun kissed the far ridge, when shadows grew long and the light stopped being kind. They didn't lock the cabin door behind them. Eli just looked at it once, like he was seeing an old friend for the last time. Then he walked. Niall followed behind him, Sky snug and quiet against her back, her small fists curled into sleep. They didn't speak, not for the first mile, nor the second. The trees were thick here, and dusk moved in fast. Every step farther from the clearing felt like a cord snapping. Ties being cut. They were alone again, truly alone. But they had each other. An owl called high above. A fox darted across the trail. Normal sounds, natural sounds. Eli clung to them like anchors. Anything but boots. But boots came. He heard them not far behind. 1, maybe 2 horses, slow moving, like they weren't in a rush to catch up. Just watching. Hurting them. Eli didn't look back. Keep walking, he murmured to Niall. She didn't respond, but picked up her pace slightly. They didn't stop to eat. Didn't stop for water. Just kept on, hearts pounding like hammers in the back of their throats. The ridge rose slow and steady. Trees thinned. The air grew colder. Sky stirred once, but settled again against her mother's back. Then the entrance came into view. It was half collapsed, just like Caleb had said. A thick board of timbers braced across the mouth, twisted and blackened in places from rot and time. But Eli could see a crawl space wide enough for them to slip through. He moved quick, dragging brush and branches to cover their tracks. Then he pulled the mule toward a side embankment and cut the rope that held the crates. The animal gave a tired whinny, but obeyed. Get inside, he said. Niall hesitated. What about I'll follow? Go. She slipped into the narrow gap, careful not to jostle Sky. Her shawl snagged once on a splintered timber, but she tugged it free. Eli watched her vanish into the shadows, then turned toward the trail. The riders came 5 minutes later. 2 men on horseback, one young, one older, both wearing the smug look of men who believed the land owed them something. The older man dismounted first, slowly, deliberately. Eli didn't lift the rifle, but his hand rested against it. We just want to talk, the younger one said. You should leave. You're hiding her, a girl who brought trouble to our town. She brought life into this world, more than either of you ever did. That ain't our concern. Eli stepped forward once. It is now. The older man narrowed his eyes. We could drag you back in chains, make an example out of you. Try. He said it without heat, without bark or boast. Just calm, steady certainty. It rattled them more than a shout would have. The younger man shifted in his saddle. The older one stared at Eli for a long time. Something passed in his eyes, doubt, maybe fear. But it vanished quick. Suit yourself, he said. Then they turned and rode off. Eli waited another full hour before slipping into the mine. The space was tight and the air stale with age, but it was shelter. Niall had laid Sky on a blanket beside a worn-out beam. The baby slept without stir. Niall met Eli's eyes. Is it over? She whispered. No, he said, settling down beside them. But it's quiet. That night, it didn't sleep much. Every creak of timber, every sound of stone settling made their breath catch. But nothing came. Not yet. In the morning, Eli explored the interior. The shaft ran deep, deeper than expected. Old tools lay rusted in the corners. A cart half buried in dust and coal. But the real treasure was the stream. It ran along the edge, narrow and steady. Cold, clean water. He brought it back in a dented tin cup, and Niall drank like she hadn't in days. They stayed in the mine 3 more days. Eli rigged a trip line at the entrance using fishing wire and old cans. Niall dried strips of jerky on a slab of stone. They slept in shifts, spoke little. Then, on the 4th morning, they heard it. Voices. Far off. Not many. Eli pressed close to the wall, listening. One of them was Caleb. I told you he wouldn't give her up. Another voice scoffed. He's mad. All this for a girl. She's more than a girl, Caleb said. She's got more spine than most men in town. You always did like outsiders. I like the truth. A pause. Then boots receded. Eli didn't move for hours after that. Not until dusk fell again. They left the mine at dawn the next day. Not back toward the house. Not toward the town. But deeper into the northern range. They found a clearing near a bend in the stream. A patch of land that smelled like pine and peace. Eli built a shelter from scratch. Niall clear brush. Sky giggled once when she saw a rabbit dart past her blanket. That evening, they sat beside a fire made small and quiet. Do you think they'll come again? Niall asked. They might. And if they do, Eli looked at her, then at the child asleep in her arms. Then I'll fight for what I didn't know I needed. She reached for his hand. Not because she was afraid, but because she believed him. And for now, that was enough. The sky stretched wide above them now, untamed and endless. It no longer felt like something hanging overhead to crush them, but something that might hold them if they fell. That clearing, tucked into the crook of the mountains, became more than shelter. It became a beginning. Eli built with his hands in silence. Niall planted small things, hopes, herbs, roots taken from her pouch that had survived the exile and the mine. Sky, in her ever-growing way, began crawling farther each day, her little hands clumsy in the moss but determined. Every moment stitched them closer. Still, the shadow of the town never quite lifted. It showed itself in Eli's tightened jaw when an owl hooted too close, or in Niall's glance to the ridge each dusk, waiting for figures that never came. Peace was new to them, and peace, as they both knew, was fragile. They spoke little of the past, not because it hurt too much, though sometimes it did, but because survival had a language of its own, and it didn't leave room for endless remembering. But one morning, as Eli sharpened the axe and Niall was boiling water for a small root tea, she swore, eased her breath. She asked it anyway. Do you miss her? He didn't pretend to misunderstand. He didn't flinch or turn away. He just paused. Every day, there was no bitterness in his voice, no tear on his cheek. Just truth, the kind that didn't need dressing up. She died in the winter, he said after a long pause. Fell sick and I couldn't stop it. Buried her before the thaw came. Niall stirred the pot. The fire cracked softly beneath it. You loved her well. I tried. That's what matters. Eli looked at her then, not with longing or confusion, but with recognition. This woman before him, so different from the one left on that fence with shame wrapped around her like a noose, was strong in a way grief had forged. And something in him understood her strength now, not as something apart from his loss, but aligned with it. Later that day, while forging farther east of the stream, they found the remnants of a hunter's camp, long abandoned. A small lean-to, broken in places, rusted traps, bones of rabbits whitened by sun. Eli turned to go, but Niall paused. In the broken earth, her eye caught the edge of something pale. She knelt, brushing aside moss and dirt, and lifted it. A doll, simple worn, corn husk head, leather-wrapped arms, clearly Navajo in make. Niall's breath caught. This was from the village, she whispered. Before the town, before they started turning on us. She didn't say it aloud, but Eli knew this doll had likely belonged to a girl like her. Maybe a cousin, maybe a neighbor, someone lost to the same judgment and pride that had nearly taken her too. Without a word, she tucked it into her satchel. They returned to the clearing by dusk, and that night, as Skye slept, Niall worked quietly by the fire, wrapping the little doll in clean cloth. A gift, she said. For Skye, to remind her where she came from. Not the fence, not the shame, but the line of strong women before her. 3 days later, Eli noticed the signs. At first, they were small. A snapped branch that hadn't broken by wind. Prints in the mud that didn't match his boots or Niall's steps. A scent in the air with smoke that wasn't theirs. They were being watched again. He didn't tell Niall at first. He wanted one more peaceful day. Just one. But by the next dawn, the signs doubled. And when Jasper, normally silent, began growling low toward the east tree line, Eli loaded his rifle. I know, Niall said simply. He looked at her, surprised. I saw it 2 nights ago. A man on the ridge. I didn't say anything. Why? Because I wanted to believe we were safe. They packed again. Less this time. Only what mattered. The doll. The shawl. 2 canteens. The knife Niall kept by her bed. Eli buried the rest. Tools, dried roots, even some of Skye's swaddles. If they came back, it'd be waiting. They moved west, into thicker forest. The terrain was harder, but it also meant fewer eyes. Jasper led now, his ears sharp, his stride low. They didn't speak much that day, only stopped to feed Skye and drink from a spring. That night, they found a cave barely wider than a wagon. Eli checked it twice before letting them inside. He didn't sleep that night, nor the next. On the 3rd evening, they spotted smoke on the far ridge. Not a campfire. Bigger. Controlled. Someone was burning something. A message. Then came the shot. Cracked through the trees like lightning. Eli dropped low, motioning for Niall to cover Skye. He peered through the brush. A single figure on the next slope. Rifle aimed, but not shooting again. Watching. Niall didn't cry, didn't scream, just clutched Skye to her chest and waited. Another shot, closer this time. Jasper barked and darted ahead. Eli lifted the rifle, scanned, fired once. Missed. Whoever was pulled back. They moved again that night, deeper still. No path, no trail, just instinct and fear. By the time they found the river, they were exhausted. But the sound of water offered something like hope. Eli scanned the bank. High ground on the opposite side. He crossed first, checked for prints. None. He called back to Niall. She followed, slipping once, but catching herself. Skye never stirred. They camped beneath a thick overhang. Eli built a fire, so small it barely flickered. I don't know how long we can run, he said quietly. We're not running. He looked up. We're living. There's a difference. In the silence that followed, the river spoke for them, whispered of time, of erosion, of how even the hardest stone can be worn down by steady water. Eli took her hand. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't tender. It was survival. It was unity. They stayed another 3 days. No shots. No footprints. Nothing. Then, early one morning, a bird landed near the fire. Red crest. Black eyes. It sang once, then flew. Sky laughed. A true laugh. Bright, full-bellied, innocent. It made Niall cry. Not because she was afraid, but because it had been so long since she'd heard that sound. They weren't safe yet. They didn't have a home, but they had each other. And for the first time since the fence, since the whispers and the shame, that was enough. It rained the next day. A slow, soaking rain that crept in quiet and soft, more mist than storm. But it turned the dirt to mud and soaked through their cloaks and coats until every step was heavy and the fire smoked instead of burning. Still, Niall didn't complain. Eli didn't grumble. Sky simply burrowed deeper into her mother's shawl and kept silent, watching the world pass in gray smears. They followed the river upstream, hoping to find higher ground and thicker cover. Jasper kept ahead, ears alert, tail low. His fur had darkened from the rain, and leaves clung to his sides, but he never wavered. He knew, same as they all did, that peace had an expiration date out here. It was always one stranger, one bullet, one misstep away. The cave they found on the 4th day wasn't much, just a deep hollow in the rocks, open to the wind on one side but dry inside. Eli cleared space while Niall built a wall of brush for warmth. They laid Sky in the middle and sat close, backs against the stone. It was here, finally, that the silence between them cracked. "I was supposed to die that day," Niall said, not looking at him. "I know it. You don't string someone up for shame unless you want the whole town to see how little her breath means." Eli didn't speak right away. Just listen like always. "My mother was a healer. Strong. Sharp. But when they came for me, she didn't stop them. I don't think she agreed, but she didn't stop them. She was afraid," Eli said quietly. "Maybe. Or maybe she thought it would save the rest of the family if I was the price. Still wrong. Yes." Sky stirred slightly, as if sensing the weight of her mother's words. Niall reached out and adjusted the cloth around her. Then she kept speaking, her voice steady. "They thought the baby was from some outsider, that I betrayed the blood. But it wasn't that. It was the town's preacher's son." Eli turned his head slowly. "He would come to the cliffs where I gathered herbs. Said he wanted to learn the ways of our people. Said God had given me a second language, my skin and my silence." She laughed bitterly. "He took what he wanted, told me if I said a word, he'd burn what little of my people remained. And when I started to show, they accused me of all the things he'd done." Eli closed his eyes, not from disbelief, but from understanding. His own story was quieter, but it still lived inside his bones like hers. "I was a teacher before the mines," he said. "One-room schoolhouse. Taught arithmetic to ranch hands boys and poetry to girls who'd only ever read seed catalogs." Niall looked at him, truly looked. "I had a wife, as you know. Her name was Mary. She was the first person I met in that town who didn't flinch when I stuttered. You stuttered. Still do sometimes. Less when I don't care who's listening." He smiled faintly. Then the smile faded. "She got sick. Consumption. I tried everything. Herbs, prayers, even the doctor in the next town. But it ate her slow, and by the time the town buried her, they'd already begun whispering that it was my fault. Said I hadn't prayed right. Said I was cursed." Niall's eyes filled. She reached for his hand. "I buried her alone. Didn't speak to anyone for 2 years. Then I started chopping trees because they couldn't talk back. And they didn't care if I prayed wrong." The fire crackled softly between them. Outside, the rain had thinned to a patter. "Why'd you open your door that night?" she asked finally. Eli looked at her. "I've been praying for a reason to keep breathing." Neither said anything more. Not because there was nothing left, but because it had all been said now. The next day, they moved again. Not out of fear, but out of need. The woods were thinning. The signs of people were growing. Boot prints near the river, a fallen fence, a forgotten trap. It was dangerous in its own way, but it also meant something else. life. They found a valley by evening. Deep, sheltered, open enough for sun but rimmed by pine and birch. A few old posts marked the edge of a homestead long abandoned. The cabin had burned to its ribs, but the land was good. Rich. Waiting. Eli walked the perimeter, his boots sinking into wet grass. Niall followed, sky tied to her chest. There's enough stone to rebuild, he said. River's close. Game trails too. She nodded slowly. Do we stay? He didn't answer right away. Then he looked at her. Do you want to? Niall turned in a slow circle. Looked at the trees. The sky. The broken fence. I think I'm tired of running. That night, they cleared what was left of the old cabin. Pushed aside charred beams. Salvaged what they could. Sky slept in a basket made of pine boughs. Jasper curled close to the fire. And in the morning, they began again. Eli laid the first stone. Niall brought water. By the third day, the outline of a new home stood where ashes had once whispered of endings. They weren't safe. Not yet, but they were settled. Then came the riders. 4 of them. Approached slow, casual, but with purpose. Eli saw them first, set his tools down, and stepped in front of the cabin. Niall came next, hand on Sky's back, steady as stone. The lead rider was clean-shaven. Coat too fine, eyes too sharp. Afternoon, he said. Eli didn't respond. Nice place you've got. Fresh walls. Good water. Still, Eli said nothing. You folks passing through or set tin down? Niall spoke then. We're building. We're staying. The man smiled, but it was the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. You got a claim? Eli narrowed his eyes. Land was abandoned. Maybe, but there's papers. Always papers. The second rider, older, with gray in his beard, spit near the fire. Especially for land near a river. Eli didn't move. Didn't blink. You got papers? The man shrugged. I got bullets. They speak louder. Jasper growled, low behind Eli. The lead rider chuckled. I like you, dog. Be a shame if you wandered off one night. Niall stepped forward now. No weepon. Just eyes burning like coals. You're not welcome here. The rider turned to her, looked her up and down, paused when he saw the baby. Well now, he said, ain't this something? A preacher's mistake and a mute lumberjack playing house. Before his hand even moved to his belt, Jasper lunged. Eli grabbed a rifle and fired once. Missed. The men scattered. But not before one yelled, We'll be back. The dust settled. Sky cried. Niall held her tight. Eli stood in front of them both. Not with rage. Not with bravado. But with a promise. They were done running. Whatever came next, they would face it as one. The next morning, they didn't pack. They stacked more stones. Eli rose before the sun and worked silently, hands steady, even as tension hung thick over the valley like smoke. Each swing of his hammer echoed a message. I'm not moving. I'm not afraid. I'm building. Niall watched him from the doorway with Sky nestled against her chest, eyes wide and watchful. The baby had taken to clinging more in the nights since the riders came, waking easily, whimpering at shadows, refusing to sleep unless pressed against her heartbeat. Niall understood. The world had taught them both not to trust peace for long. She stepped out once Sky had settled and walked to where Eli stood at the corner post. He handed her a bucket and she filled it at the river. Then they mixed more clay for the walls. No words passed between them. None were needed. What they built wasn't just shelter. It was defiance. Around noon, Jasper started pacing, then growling. Eli looked up sharply. Niall froze mid-step. 3 riders this time. The same sharp-eyed man in front, minus one of his men. They didn't shout, didn't draw, just rode in slow, circling the half-finished cabin like buzzards eyeing a wounded deer. Eli stepped forward again, rifle cradled but not raised. Thought we were clear, he said. The lead rider dismounted, brushed dust from his coat. I was hoping we could talk man to man. No need for wild dogs or loud bangs. You threaten my family. The man's lip curled. That's a strong word for what y'all are. Niall stepped out behind Eli. Sky cried softly in her shawl. The man tilted his head. Still here, brave, or foolish? He took a step closer. Jasper snapped forward, teeth bared, and Eli raised the rifle. I won't miss this time. The rider's hand twitched toward his belt. A sharp whistle rang out from the trees. Everyone froze. A figure stepped from the shadows beyond the tree line. Tall, broad, wrapped in a worn Navajo blanket, rifle slung low, face hidden under a brimmed hat. Niall's breath caught. She knew that walk. The man lifted his head. It was her cousin, Toe. He had not spoken to her in 3 years. But now he stood there, gaze sweeping the valley, rifle angled casually toward the ground, but ready. The rider's eyes narrowed. This your land now? Toe didn't answer, just looked at Eli. Then Niall. Then Sky. Then he said quietly, You got kin here. The rider hesitated. More figures emerged behind Toe. Not many, 4, maybe 5, but enough. Some held bows, others axes, all silent and watching. Eli's fingers tensed on the rifle, but the rider just spat in the dirt. Wasn't worth the trip anyway, he muttered. You'll run out of food before the first frost. He turned and mounted his horse. As they rode off, Toe said, Next time you ride in here like vultures, I won't speak first. Then silence fell. Toe didn't come closer. He didn't embrace Niall, didn't even look directly at the child. He just said, We'll be nearby, but you make your own way. Niall nodded, throat tight. Thank you. He gave a short nod, then vanished back into the trees. The sun broke through the clouds that evening. For the first time in weeks, they sat by the fire without checking the dark between every flicker. Eli made tea. Niall stitched a baby blanket from scraps of old cloth. Jasper snored by the door. Sky slept easy, lips twitching in dreams. They had survived something, and they had been seen by someone who mattered. That alone felt like a kind of rebirth. By the second month, the cabin had 4 full walls. By the third, a roof. Neighbors came once, a family of trappers who offered salted pork and news. They didn't ask about the baby, just nodded at the fence Eli built and the garden Niall had started and said, You folks look settled. They were. Not because the fear was gone, but because they chose to stay anyway. One night, as the wind turned cool and sharp with the promise of autumn, Eli sat at the fire whittling another toy. A small deer this time, delicate and curved just right. Niall watched him for a long moment. Then she said, I was 19 when I got with child. I thought it'd be the end of me. Eli didn't look up. Wasn't. No, it was the beginning. He finished the carving and set it beside the others. A bear, a bird, a fox. Niall stood and walked over. Picked up the fox, held it. Then, after a long silence, she asked, Do you ever think of starting over? Ili blinked. I don't understand. With me. He turned to her. I already did, he said simply. The next morning, he woke early, stared at the ceiling he'd built, listened to Sky babble softly in next room, listened to Niall singing to her. It wasn't loud. It wasn't perfect, but it was whole. Later, at the river, he knelt in the shallows and ran his hand through the cold water. It felt like washing something off, years of grief, silence, fear. When he returned, Niall was waiting, with a threadbare book of names in her hand. She handed it to him. I think we should write them down, she said. The ones who helped, the ones we lost, and the name we'll give her. Eli opened the book. First line, he wrote, Mary, first home. Then, Niall, storm and fire. Then beneath that, Sky, our light after the dark. And the last page, left blank for now, just said, future. They didn't need a preacher or a ring. Just a fire, a roof, a child sleeping safe. It was enough, and more than enough. For the first time since his wife died, for the first time since she'd been strung up like a thing left to rot, they were alive, together. And for the first time, it didn't feel temporary. End of the story. Subscribe for more. Thanks for listening. Have a blessed day.